so now we are doing chapter 9. I'm going to be the driver and Vhukhudo is going to be my navigator. In chapter 9, we are going to be connecting to an API to persist data. So the first thing that we're going to do is that in our terminal, we're going to run this command here to install our JSON server. And then after doing all of that, we're going to go to the folder that has todos.json. For me, it's the source or src folder. And in that folder, we're going to run this JSON server todos.json. And what this will do is it's going to run a mock REST API server in your local machine, and you can see it at this endpoint here. So if I go here, as you can see, this is what we have, and if I open todos.json, you can see it's the same things, right? So after this, we are going to so because of our JSON server, because JSON server runs on port 3000 on our local host, we have to change the port that we run our React app. So for me, I tried doing this, it didn't work. I ended up just changing the port to 3001, but you just use a different port from the one from 3000 because you're going to be serving your REST API there, right? And then to create a custom hook and fetch initial app data, we are going to retrieve our to-dos from the API. So our initial to-dos in app.js will just be an empty array, right? So it's going to be to-dos initial state equals to just an empty to-do array, right? And then we are going to in our use api.js, right? In our use api.js, we are going to create a custom hook to call our API and create a new file to use api.js with the following code, right? So we're going to add this to use api.js, and we're going to apply use effect with an empty array in the second argument to get to call get data when the component is mounted, and then in our to-do list.js we will call the use API, and we're gonna use the code here in bold to do that, right? And in use effects, we're going to dispatch the get action with the save to dos as the payload, and then we're gonna move to app.js again, and in the to dos reducer, we're going to add the case for get, right? And then now for the delete request to remove to dos, we want to be able to delete a to do, and to do that, we're going to need to get the specific URL for the to do item, right? So it's going to be to do /1. So for example, if we want to delete this one, we're just going to this is going to be the URL, because this is what takes us to that first one. You see, it's just the first one now, and if it's the second one, we put we just put the ID, right? And it's going to take us to that specific to do item. So if we want to delete it, we have to reference it by its ID, right? Specific ID. And this is the code that we use to do that, right? So we're going to use an asynchronous function, and we're going to use the axios.delete method and use the ID to reference that endpoint, right? And we're going to concatenate it to the URL that we already have, right? And then after that, to perform post request to add to dos, we'll perform a post request to add a to do in our to do list.js by adding the following code here. And we're going to move on back to app.js to our to dos reducer, and in that add case, we're going to remove the line to create a new to do, as it's now created in to do list and passed as the payload, right, via the API request. And in our added to dos, we're going to append the payload containing new to do straight to the current to dos in state, right? And then if you want to patch or update the data, we're going to use patch requests to update those to dos, right? And we're just going to add this line of code here, right? And we're going to use the patch method. We're going to concatenate to the endpoint. We're going to concatenate the edit to do ID, and we're just going to give it a new item, right? We're going to pass it in as a new argument, whatever we want to add, right? And after that, we can change the buttons, but this is just for styling. This is just for styling, just to make them pop out a bit more. And this is the final code that we are supposed to have when it's all said and done, right? So before I summarize this chapter, I just want to show you how everything works by going to our React app. As you can see, our React app and this REST API, it's the same thing, right? Because we're getting our data from the API. And then if I want to add something, for instance, let's say I want to say finish recording, right? I want to add this, right? So I add it, right? I add it here, and as you can see, it's added to our to-do list. So now it's added to our JSON. When we, I mean, to our React app, when we go to our JSON, you see that we have this right here, right? And yeah, so in summary, with this knowledge, we can move on and build more complicated enterprise level, fully functional React applications of our own. And yeah, this is the last chapter. So I hope, Vhukhudo, you enjoyed this book as much as I did, and hope that we both would like to learn more, right? So uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you very much. Goodbye from me. And are there any questions or comments from Vhukhudo?
No, no, everything is fine.
All right, thank you. Bye bye.